The never-ending tariff war between Trump and the European Union is only intensifying. The EU is preparing a massive counter-strike, planning to impose 30% tariffs on around $100 billion worth of US goods. This move comes in response to Trump's decision to follow through on his threat to slap the same rate on most EU exports after the August 1st tariff deadline. But here's the catch. The EU's tariffs would only take effect next month if no deal is reached and the US proceeds with its levies after the deadline.
The European Commission has plans for counter-tariffs on $109 billion of US goods, and it aims to submit the proposal to EU members for approval on Wednesday, all while its trade chief is due to hold talks with US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The Commission said its primary focus was to achieve a negotiated outcome with Washington. That, as it tries to avert 30% tariffs President Donald Trump has said he will impose on the 27-nation bloc on August 1st. Trade Chief Maros Sefcovic is due to speak with Lutnick Wednesday afternoon. That's before Commission officials brief EU ambassadors on the state of play. The Commission may have gained hope from the initial deals struck between the US and Japan. European shares climbed more than 1% after the update. EU diplomats were reluctant to provide early comments and instead said they were picking through details of the US-Japan deal.
US threats of 30% tariffs on imports from the EU have left France's beauty industry reeling, prompting questions over how much of a premium Americans will pay for the French touch. In 2024, beauty exports to the US from France were worth over $3.4 billion, the industry's union FEBEA said. This represented about 12% of all French exports. Perfume made up over half of the industry's overseas orders, according to the union, with 1 in 5 perfumes sold abroad bought by American customers. Anne-Marie Gabellica, founder of brand Ulution, said 30% tariffs would deprive the industry of an enormous client base.
For French cosmetics brands, exports are an essential outlet. It's not always easy to imagine, but some French brands are basically only sold outside France. That needs to be understood.
The US export market was growing, but momentum will be undermined if US President Donald Trump's 30% tariff threat is realised. That's if a trade deal between Washington and the EU is not reached by August the 1st. For FEBEA, the impact on the French economy of 30% levies would be dramatic. The union's head said, according to economists, it could lead to the loss of thousands of jobs.
Nous avons en particulier dit qu'il fallait déclencher un certain nombre de mesures de riposte dans l'hypothèse où un accord n'était pas trouvé d'ici au 1er août. Ça porterait sur plus de 90 milliards d'euros de produits américains qui aurait vocation à être taxé par la Commission européenne. Ça signifie également mobiliser des outils qui n'ont pas encore été utilisés jusqu'à présent, et en particulier ce que l'on appelle l'outil anti-coercition. C'est un outil qui est de nature non tarifaire, mais qui peut se traduire par des contrôles à l'export, qui peut se traduire par des restrictions à la publicité en ligne pour les plateformes numériques, qui peut se traduire par un certain nombre d'outils qui sont nécessaires aujourd'hui pour se mettre dans une posture de négociation qui soit plus ferme et qui soit plus crédible.
Stocks finished flat to lower Friday, with the Dow dropping about 1/3% and the S&P 500 and NASDAQ ending near break-even. All three indexes dipped earlier in the session after a Financial Times report indicated U.S. President Donald Trump was pushing for steep new tariffs on European Union products. The report said the Trump administration was eyeing a minimum tariff of between 15% and 20% in any deal with the European bloc. Joseph Shaposhnik, portfolio manager with Rainwater Equity, says he isn't concerned about any lingering effects of these negotiations or the ultimate deals.
Tariffs will be a persistent topic of conversation and a driver of markets to some extent for some period of time, but not for the indefinite future. And we think there will be a lot of bluster, a lot of loud conversations, a lot of headlines, but at the end of the day, we're most likely to end up basically where we started in terms of tariff rates in general. Perhaps there'll be some level of elevated tariffs, but they will not be significant enough to really impact the overall economy. We're going to end up basically where we started.
Economic data this week offered mixed signals, including robust retail sales, a rise in consumer inflation, and flat producer prices for June. Data released on Friday showed the University of Michigan's closely watched Consumer Sentiment Index rose this month, though consumers remain concerned about future price pressures. An earnings season kicked off this week, giving an opportunity to U.S. corporations to showcase how tariffs were or were not affecting their businesses. Stocks on the move included 3M, which fell more than 3.5% after the company said the impact of tariffs will mostly be felt in the second half of the year. And shares of Netflix fell 5%, despite the success of Squid Game helping the company surpass earnings forecasts. The streaming company also lifted its annual revenue outlook.
Par exemple, déguster ou discuter avec. Ça a du goût, ça sent bien.
Est-ce que tu peux...
Révélisse extra route.